The first thing Vincenzo Cassano felt when he woke up was pain. Not the loud kind that makes a man scream, but the slow, humiliating ache of someone realizing they had been outplayed. His head throbbed, his wrists burned, something rough cut into his skin, rope, thick rope, tight rope. He opened his eyes slowly and saw the inside of his own car, parked in a dark alley behind the bar he visited almost every night. The leather seats smelled of whiskey and smoke. Rain tapped softly on the windshield. Then he noticed her. Sitting calmly in the driver's seat, one leg crossed over the other, was the bartender. Blonde hair, quiet eyes, a gun resting loosely in her hand. She was watching him like a scientist watching an experiment finally wake up. Vincenzo Cassano was the most feared mafia boss in Milan. Men with armies had failed to corner him. Yet here he was, tied up like a careless drunk in the back seat of his own car by a woman who had poured his whiskey only 20 minutes ago. Emily watched him carefully. She had imagined this moment for 14 years. 14 years of training. 14 years of rage carefully sharpened like a blade. Her voice came out calm, almost gentle. "Good evening, Mr. Cassano." Vincenzo blinked slowly, trying to clear the fog in his head. The last thing he remembered was the bartender placing a glass in front of him. Whiskey, his usual brand. Then nothing. His eyes sharpened as the truth clicked into place. "You drugged me." Emily gave a small shrug. "You noticed? Good." She leaned slightly closer, the dim streetlight revealing the cold focus in her eyes. "My name is Emily." Vincenzo studied her face carefully, trying to understand why someone like her would risk kidnapping the most dangerous man in northern Italy, but then she said the words that froze the air inside the car. "My parents were Marco and Sofia Valenti." Vincenzo's eyes widened instantly. He hadn't heard those names in 14 years. "And you killed them." "Okay, guys, before we continue, I know you're already hooked on this story. So go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. You're part of this story too, so don't just sit back quietly. Let me know where you're watching from. Now, let's continue. Emily watched Vincenzo carefully, waiting for fear, guilt, or panic. Instead, confusion filled his face. Real confusion. "Killed them?" he repeated slowly. "Emily, your parents were my father's closest advisors." His voice lowered slightly. "They were family." Emily's jaw tightened. This was exactly the lie she had expected. The NIS had warned her about it. Mafia bosses always pretended loyalty after betrayal. She raised the pistol slightly. "Don't insult their memory." Vincenzo shook his head slowly, trying to understand what nightmare he had walked into. "After they died, my father spent months searching for you," he said quietly. "You disappeared from London overnight." Emily's heart skipped for half a second. That detail was accurate. Too accurate. But she crushed the thought instantly. Lies were always strongest when mixed with truth. Emily leaned back in the seat, her voice sharpening like a knife. "You're going to tell me exactly why Raymond Cassano ordered their deaths." Vincenzo stared at her in stunned silence. "My father," he said slowly. "Raymond Cassano tried to find the men who killed them for years." Emily laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Nice story." She pulled a small recorder from her pocket and placed it on the dashboard. "You're going to confess." Vincenzo's mind raced. Something about this situation was terribly wrong. The girl in front of him clearly believed every word she was saying. But if she was Marco Valenti's daughter, then someone had been lying to her for 14 years. "Emily," he said carefully, "who told you that?" Her eyes flashed dangerously. "The people who saved me." Vincenzo studied her again. Blonde hair, blue eyes, Sofia Valenti's smile hidden behind years of anger. He suddenly realized something terrifying. If she had been trained by professionals, This was not random revenge. This was an operation. Before he could say another word, headlights suddenly flooded the alley from the front. Emily frowned and turned toward the windshield. A black van had just pulled across the narrow exit, blocking the road completely. The engine was still running. Its headlights burned through the rain like two cold eyes. Vincenzo's voice dropped instantly. "Emily," he said quietly, "those are not my men." Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't try tricks." But then the van doors slammed open. 3 men stepped out. Assault rifles already raised. One of them shouted something in Portuguese. Vincenzo's eyes went cold instantly. "Get down!" he roared. Emily barely had time to react before the first burst of gunfire shattered the windshield. Bullets ripped through the glass like a storm of metal. The sound exploded through the alley. Instinct took over. Emily slammed the car into reverse while ducking low across the seat. Glass sprayed across the dashboard. Another burst of gunfire tore through the trunk. The car spun violently as she floored the accelerator and smashed into a row of trash bins behind them. The attackers kept firing, trying to shred the vehicle before it could escape. Emily cursed under her breath and threw the car into drive. The engine screamed as she rammed forward, swerving around the van and racing into the narrow streets of Milan. Rain blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and red. Her heart pounded wildly. This mission had just turned into chaos. She glanced back at Vincenzo, still tied in the back seat. Her voice shook with anger and confusion. "Who are they?" Vincenzo stared at the disappearing van through the shattered rear window. His voice was quiet now, dead serious. "Emily," he said slowly, "I think someone wants both of us dead." The rain outside the speeding car pulled Emily backward into memories she had tried to turn into fuel instead of pain. 14 years earlier, she had been a 9-year-old girl in a quiet London apartment, sitting at a kitchen table that suddenly felt too big without her parents. That night had started like any other. Her mother had called her before bedtime from Italy, promising they would visit soon. Her father had joked that he would bring chocolate from Milan. Emily had fallen asleep smiling. But the next morning, the world shattered. Men in dark coats knocked on the door. Their voices were calm, but heavy. They spoke words a child should never hear. Armed robbery, multiple gunshots, no survivors. Emily didn't fully understand the sentence they kept repeating, but she understood the silence that followed. The house felt hollow, like all the warmth had been ripped out overnight. Cameras outside the building flashed like lightning. News channels ran the story all day. 2 respected Italian legal advisors murdered in a brutal robbery. The story was quick, clean, and believable. But the little girl staring at the television knew something was wrong. Her parents were careful people. They were never careless. And deep inside her chest, a cold question had started growing. 3 days later, strangers came again. This time they didn't wear coats. They wore authority. They introduced themselves as agents of the NIS. They spoke softly, kneeling down so their eyes met hers. They told her they had been friends of her parents, protectors. They explained that the robbery story on the news was not the full truth. Her parents had been important advisors to a powerful organization, the Cassano family. Emily did not understand the word mafia yet, but she understood betrayal when the agents explained the rest. According to them, Raymond Cassano had turned on her parents after a disagreement over money and loyalty. The agents described it like a cold execution, ordered by a man who wanted silence instead of honesty. Emily's small hands had trembled as she listened. Something inside her heart cracked and hardened at the same time. "Why?" she had whispered. The older agent gave a slow sigh. "Because power makes people cruel." That sentence stayed with her. It became the first brick in a wall of hatred she would spend the next 14 years building. The NIS took Emily away from London that same week. They told her it was for protection, that the Cassano family might still try to erase loose ends. She was moved to a quiet training compound far from the city, hidden between forests and steel fences. At first, she thought it was a strange boarding school, But within months, she realized it was something much colder. Her teachers were not normal teachers. They were former soldiers, intelligence officers, and specialists in things children were never meant to learn. They taught her languages: Italian, Portuguese, Russian. They trained her body until every muscle screamed, running before sunrise. Martial arts drills until her knuckles bled, balance training, stealth movement, weapons practice. By the time she was 14, Emily could disarm a grown man twice her size in seconds. The instructors praised her focus. They said she had rare discipline. What they didn't say out loud was the real reason she trained so hard. Every punch she threw carried the image of a man she had never met. Raymond Cassano, the monster who had taken her parents away. By the time Emily turned 23, the girl who cried in a London kitchen had disappeared completely. In her place stood a woman shaped by 14 years of quiet rage. She moved like a shadow, fast and controlled, her body responding instantly to danger. The NIS finally called her into a private briefing room. On the wall was a photograph of a man standing outside a restaurant in Milan. Thick dark hair, cold eyes, a tattoo visible along the side of his neck. Vincenzo Cassano, the son of Raymond Cassano, the new head of the Cassano family after Raymond's death 5 years earlier. The senior agent explained the mission calmly. Vincenzo Cassano has grown powerful. Removing him will weaken the entire organization. Emily studied the photo in silence. The face staring back at her carried the same name that had haunted her childhood. "You'll infiltrate his routine," the agent continued. "He frequents a private bar in Milan several nights a week." Then he slid a passport and documents across the table. A new identity: Emily Parker, bartender. The agent leaned forward slightly. "When the opportunity appears, you eliminate him." Emily didn't hesitate. "When do I leave?" The agent's expression stayed neutral. "Tonight." The night Emily first stepped into Milan felt unreal. The city lights shimmered on wet streets, reflecting against old stone buildings that had watched centuries of secrets unfold. The bar she was assigned to work in was quiet but expensive, the kind of place powerful men visited when they wanted privacy without looking suspicious. She worked calmly, serving drinks and studying faces. Then one evening, the door opened and Vincenzo Cassano walked in for the first time. The room shifted around him. Conversations lowered. Even the bartender beside Emily straightened nervously. Vincenzo moved with quiet confidence, like someone used to danger but bored by it. He sat at the far end of the bar and ordered whiskey. And Emily poured the drink carefully and placed it in front of him without saying much. For weeks, that was their routine. He arrived late. She served him. Sometimes their eyes met briefly, but he never tried to talk. He was careful with strangers. Hard to approach, hard to trap. But Emily was patient. 14 years of hatred had taught her patience better than any instructor ever could. And finally, one night, she saw her opening. The rain hammered the windshield as Emily pushed the car through the narrow streets of Milan. Broken glass rattled across the dashboard every time the tires hit a bump. The windshield was cracked like a spiderweb, making the glowing city lights stretch into strange shapes. Her heart pounded hard in her chest, but her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Years of training had drilled one thing into her mind: panic kills faster than bullets. She glanced quickly in the rearview mirror. No headlights yet, but that meant nothing. Whoever had attacked them was organized. They would not give up easily. In the back seat, Vincenzo shifted slightly against the ropes tying his wrists and ankles. The drug was fading from his system now. His eyes were sharp again, watching everything. "Turn left at the next corner," he said calmly. Emily scoffed. "You think I'm taking driving directions from the man I'm supposed to kill?" Vincenzo didn't react to the insult. "If you keep going straight," he replied quietly, "you'll drive right into a police patrol route." Emily hesitated for half a second, then swerved left anyway. The streets grew narrower, darker. She hated that he might actually be right. The silence inside the car stretched tight as piano wire. Emily's mind raced with questions. This mission had been clear, simple. Approach the target, eliminate him. But the moment those bullets started flying, the entire situation collapsed into confusion. Her jaw tightened as she spoke again. Start talking. Vincenzo leaned his head back slightly against the seat, watching raindrops crawl down the shattered glass. About what? Emily slammed the steering wheel with her palm. About who just tried to turn us into Swiss cheese. Vincenzo studied her expression carefully. She wasn't faking the anger. She was genuinely confused. That meant she hadn't been sent by the shooters. Interesting. Those men spoke Portuguese, he said slowly, which means they're not local Milan crews. Emily frowned. So? Vincenzo's voice lowered slightly. There's only one person who would hire foreign mercenaries to attack me that boldly. Emily shot him a quick glare. And who would that be? Vincenzo didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved toward the dark streets passing outside the window. Someone who knows the Cassano family from the inside. Emily felt irritation rising in her chest. The mission briefing had never mentioned any outside threats. The NIS had described the Cassano family as the main danger, not the target of one. She accelerated again, weaving through a silent intersection as the rain thickened. You're lying, she muttered. Vincenzo sighed softly. Emily, if I wanted to lie, I wouldn't start by telling you my attackers probably know me personally. That answer made her hesitate. He had a point, but she refused to show uncertainty. You still haven't explained why someone wants you dead tonight. Vincenzo tilted his head slightly, studying the ropes binding his wrists. Untie me and I'll help you survive the next 10 minutes. Emily laughed sharply. Nice try. Vincenzo shrugged. Your choice, but if those men find us again while I'm tied up like this, your mission won't matter much. Emily gripped the wheel harder. She hated that every word he said sounded logical. But she had spent 14 years preparing to kill this man. Trusting him was not an option. Suddenly, bright headlights appeared in the mirror behind them. Fast, closing distance quickly. Emily cursed under her breath. They found us. Vincenzo twisted slightly to see better through the cracked rear window. A black SUV was racing toward them, engine roaring like an angry animal. That's them, he said quietly. Emily's brain snapped into action instantly. She slammed the accelerator. The car shot forward, tires squealing on the wet road. The SUV behind them followed like a predator locking onto prey. The distance between them shrank dangerously fast. Then the passenger window of the SUV rolled down. A rifle barrel appeared. Down! Vincenzo shouted. Emily ducked just as another burst of gunfire exploded behind them. Bullets punched into the trunk and rear door. The car jerked violently. Emily swerved hard, barely avoiding a parked scooter. Her mind calculated options in seconds. If she kept driving straight, they would eventually box her in. She needed unpredictability. A sudden idea flashed through her mind. She yanked the wheel sharply and turned into a narrow alley barely wide enough for the car. The alley twisted like a snake between tall buildings. Garbage bins and crates forced Emily to weave left and right at dangerous speeds. The SUV tried to follow, but its larger frame struggled with the tight turns. Emily glanced at Vincenzo again, breathing hard now. If we die tonight, she snapped, I'm blaming you. Vincenzo almost smiled despite the chaos. If we die tonight, he replied calmly, I'll blame whoever told you I killed your parents. Emily's eyes flashed with anger. Don't! But before the argument could explode, something unexpected happened. The alley suddenly opened into a quiet industrial street. Emily slowed slightly, trying to listen. The SUV engine was gone. No headlights, no gunfire, just rain. She exhaled slowly, adrenaline still burning through her veins. For the first time since the ambush began, the night felt quiet again. Too quiet. Vincenzo leaned forward slightly in the back seat, his voice thoughtful now. Emily, he said, you still think I'm your enemy? Emily kept her eyes on the road. You are. Vincenzo shook his head slowly. No. His voice was calm, almost certain. Your real enemy is the person who sent those men tonight. He paused before finishing the thought. I think that person knows you're here. The industrial street was almost empty, the kind of place people forgot existed once the factories closed for the night. Emily slowed the car and finally pulled beneath the shadow of an old warehouse. The rain softened into a steady whisper against the metal roof above them. For the first time since the ambush, the engine went quiet. Emily sat still, gripping the steering wheel while her breathing slowly returned to normal. Her mind refused to settle. None of this was supposed to happen. She was meant to spike Vincenzo's drink, extract a confession, and finish the mission cleanly. Instead, someone had tried to erase both of them in a storm of bullets. She glanced back at the man tied in her back seat. Vincenzo Cassano looked far calmer than someone who had just survived an assassination attempt. His dark hair was slightly messy, and the faint tattoo on his neck was visible in the dim light from the street lamp outside. He studied her quietly, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're thinking too loud," he said finally. Emily scoffed. "I'm not thinking out loud at all." Vincenzo tilted his head slightly. "Your shoulders are tight. Your jaw is locked. That means your plan is failing." Emily turned in her seat and aimed the pistol at him again. "Stop pretending you understand me." Vincenzo didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly nodded toward the ropes binding his wrists. "If you really want answers, we're going to need to talk like two people who want to survive the night." Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust him. But another voice in her mind whispered something uncomfortable. If those attackers weren't Cassano soldiers, then someone else had planned tonight's ambush. Someone who knew both her mission and Vincenzo's location. That thought made her stomach twist. She leaned forward slightly, her voice sharp. "You said someone from inside the Cassano world might want you dead." Vincenzo nodded once. "Yes." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Then give me a name." Vincenzo was silent for a moment. Rain tapped softly against the broken windshield while he thought. "Before I say anything," he replied carefully, "you need to understand something about your parents." Emily's expression hardened instantly. "Don't." Vincenzo ignored the warning. "Marco and Sofia Valenti were not just advisors to my father. They were the smartest strategists our family ever had." Emily's heart tightened despite herself. She had spent years imagining her parents as victims, but hearing someone describe them with respect felt strangely different. Vincenzo continued quietly. "My father trusted them with everything: money, negotiations, security. When they died, the Cassano family lost more than advisors. We lost our compass." Emily shook her head angrily. "Stop rewriting history." Vincenzo sighed softly. "Emily, if my father had ordered their deaths, why would he spend 2 years hunting the killers?" That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Emily's training told her this was manipulation, a psychological trick to weaken her resolve, but something about the way he said it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded tired, honest. She forced her voice to stay cold. "You're wasting time." Vincenzo leaned forward slightly, the rope pulling tight around his wrists. "Then answer one question." Emily glared at him. "Make it quick." Vincenzo's dark eyes locked onto hers. "Who told you my father killed them?" Emily answered immediately. "The NIS." Vincenzo frowned slightly. "And they never mentioned the apprentice?" Emily blinked once. "What apprentice?" Vincenzo studied her face carefully, realizing she truly didn't know. His voice dropped lower. "Marco Valenti trained a young strategist years before you were born. A junior advisor. Brilliant, ambitious, but impatient." Emily felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. Something about the direction of this conversation felt dangerous. "What was his name?" she asked slowly. Vincenzo looked toward the dark street outside, unremembering old stories his father used to tell at dinner, stories about loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of ambition. Then he spoke the name quietly. Estevao. The word seemed to echo inside the car. Emily felt her chest tighten without understanding why. That name stirred a faint memory she couldn't place. Vincenzo continued speaking, his voice steady. Estevao admired your parents, but he always wanted more power than they allowed him to have. My father suspected he was leaking information to rival families, but there was never proof. Emily shook her head quickly. You're lying again. Vincenzo shrugged slightly. Maybe. He nodded toward the bullet holes in the car door. But if I'm lying, then explain why someone hired Portuguese mercenaries to kill us tonight. Emily froze. Portuguese. Vincenzo had mentioned that earlier. The men who attacked them spoke Portuguese. The name Estevao suddenly didn't feel random anymore. Before she could respond, a distant engine sound drifted down the street. Emily's eyes snapped toward the mirror again. Another set of headlights was approaching slowly from the far end of the road. Vincenzo's voice turned serious instantly. Emily, he said quietly, if that car stops here, you're going to have to make a choice. Emily gripped the pistol tighter. What choice? Vincenzo looked directly at her and answered without hesitation. Whether you still think I'm the man who destroyed your life, or the only person who can help you find the one who really did. The approaching headlights cut through the rain like a blade. Emily's pulse quickened as the car slowly rolled down the empty industrial street toward them. She lowered her head slightly, watching through the cracked windshield while her mind raced through possible outcomes. If the men inside that car were the same shooters from earlier, then stopping here had been a mistake. But running blindly again could trap them somewhere worse. She tightened her grip on the pistol, her instincts sharpening. In the back seat, Vincenzo leaned slightly forward despite the ropes binding his wrists. His voice dropped to a low whisper. Don't start the engine yet. Emily frowned but stayed still. The car drawing closer wasn't moving like a hunting vehicle. No sudden acceleration. No lights flashing wildly. It crept forward slowly, almost carefully. Then, to Emily's surprise, it passed right by them. Just an old delivery truck carrying crates in the back. The driver never even glanced their way. The truck disappeared down the road, leaving the street quiet again. Emily exhaled slowly. Her nerves were stretched thin. But the silence after the truck left made something else louder. Her thoughts. Emily finally turned toward Vincenzo again. The pistol was still aimed at him, but the anger in her eyes had shifted into something more complicated. Doubt. You said the name Estevao like you knew him personally, she said quietly. Vincenzo shook his head. Not personally, but I heard enough stories from my father. He leaned back slightly against the seat, his voice calm but serious. Estevao was brilliant, too brilliant sometimes. Marco Valenti taught him strategy, negotiation, patience. But Estevao always wanted results faster. Emily felt the name echo inside her mind again. A strange image flickered through her memory. A tall man once visiting her parents' home when she was very young. She remembered a deep voice, a laugh, but the memory was foggy, like a dream fading after waking. Why would someone like that kill my parents? She asked quietly. Vincenzo's answer came slowly. Because betrayal is the fastest way to power in our world. Emily's jaw tightened. That explanation sounded logical, but it clashed with everything the NIS had told her for 14 years. According to them, the Cassano family had ordered the execution. The case had been closed, clean, certain. Yet tonight, someone had tried to eliminate both her and Vincenzo in the same attack. Emily turned slightly and looked out the windshield. The rainwater slid down the cracked glass like thin silver threads. Her voice softened without her noticing. The agents who raised me said Raymond Cassano was afraid my parents would expose corruption inside the family. Vincenzo frowned slightly. Expose corruption? Emily nodded. That's why he had them killed. Vincenzo gave a quiet sigh. Emily, my father trusted your parents more than anyone else alive. He paused before continuing. If they had evidence of corruption, he would have asked them to lead the investigation. Emily looked back at him sharply. You expect me to believe that? Vincenzo shrugged slightly. I expect you to start asking better questions. That sentence hit her harder than she expected. For years she had believed she already had the truth. Revenge had been simple when the enemy was clear. But now that certainty was cracking like the shattered windshield in front of her. Vincenzo leaned forward slightly again, lowering his voice. Let me ask you something. Emily narrowed her eyes. Careful. Vincenzo ignored the warning. If the NIS told you my father killed your parents, why send you to kill me now? Emily opened her mouth to answer, but the words didn't come immediately. The question hadn't occurred to her before. Vincenzo continued calmly. My father died 5 years ago. If he was the murderer, your revenge should have ended with him. Emily felt a knot forming in her chest. Maybe they wanted to destroy the entire Cassano family. Vincenzo shook his head slowly. Then they would send a sniper or a bomb, not a single agent pretending to be a bartender. Emily's fingers tightened around the pistol again. His logic was cutting through the story she had believed for most of her life. She hated how easily the cracks were appearing. Vincenzo studied her carefully and spoke again, softer now. Emily, I think someone wanted you close to me. Her eyes snapped up. Why? Vincenzo answered quietly. Because whoever attacked us tonight knew exactly where we would be. The realization spread through Emily's mind like cold water. If Vincenzo was right, then the ambush hadn't been random. It had been planned around her mission. Someone had known she would drug Vincenzo. Someone had known she would move him into the car. And someone had chosen that exact moment to send killers. Her voice came out tense. You think I was bait? Vincenzo nodded slowly. Yes. Emily's stomach twisted with anger. For 14 years she had trained to become the weapon. The hunter. Not the trap. She turned away, staring through the cracked windshield again, while the rain continued falling over Milan's empty streets. Then Vincenzo spoke again, his voice serious. Emily, there's something else you need to know. She didn't turn around. What now? Vincenzo hesitated before answering. The Cassano family never stopped searching for you after your parents died. Emily finally looked back at him, disbelief written across her face. Why would they? Vincenzo's expression softened slightly. Because Marco Valenti once saved my father's life. Emily blinked. What? Vincenzo nodded once. And my father swore he would protect your family forever. The words hung heavy in the car. Emily felt the ground beneath her beliefs shifting again. But before she could ask another question, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She slowly pulled it out and looked at the screen. The number calling her was one she recognized instantly. Her NIS handler. Emily answered carefully and raised the phone to her ear. The agent's voice came through calm and direct. Emily, status report. She glanced at Vincenzo, then back at the dark road ahead. Her next words came out slower than she expected. The target is alive. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then the agent spoke again, his tone suddenly colder. Then finish the mission. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about his voice felt impatient, like he didn't care about the ambush that almost killed her. She lowered the phone slowly. Vincenzo watched her expression carefully. Bad news? He asked. Emily ended the call without answering. Her voice came out thoughtful, almost distant. Maybe? She looked at him again, her mind spinning with new possibilities. Or maybe the truth just started showing itself. The phone screen slowly went dark in Emily's hand. For a long moment she didn't move. The rain outside had softened again, tapping lightly against the damaged windshield like quiet fingers trying to get her attention. Her mind replayed the conversation with her handler over and over. Something had been wrong with his voice. No concern about the ambush. No questions about the attackers. just one cold instruction. Finish the mission. That was not how the NIS normally worked. They trained their agents to adapt, gather intelligence, and survive unexpected situations. But tonight her handler had sounded impatient, almost desperate to end things quickly. Emily slowly slipped the phone back into her pocket and stared ahead at the empty street. Behind her, Vincenzo watched her silently. He didn't ask questions yet. He could see the storm moving behind her eyes. Finally, Emily spoke. "He didn't ask if I was hurt." Vincenzo raised an eyebrow slightly. "Your handler?" Emily nodded once. "He only cared if you were dead." Vincenzo leaned back against the seat again, thinking carefully. "That's interesting." Emily turned sharply. "Interesting?" Her voice carried frustration now. "Someone tried to kill both of us and my own agency barely reacted." Vincenzo gave a small shrug. "Exactly." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" Vincenzo's dark eyes stayed calm as he answered. "It means whoever planned tonight expected that attack to happen." Emily's pulse jumped slightly. That possibility had been circling her mind already, but hearing someone else say it made it feel more real. "You think my agency knew about the ambush?" she asked. Vincenzo shook his head slowly. "Not necessarily the entire agency." He leaned forward slightly, the rope tightening around his wrists again. "But someone inside it might have." Emily's stomach twisted again. For years, she had trusted the NIS with absolute loyalty. They had raised her, trained her, shaped her into the weapon she had become. The idea that someone inside that system might have been manipulating her life felt almost impossible to accept. "Why would they do that?" she asked quietly. Vincenzo didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved toward the dark buildings around them, as if the answer might be hiding somewhere in the rain. "Because someone powerful benefits if both of us die tonight." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Vincenzo took a slow breath. "Someone who knows your past, and my present." Emily leaned back in her seat, thinking hard. The name Estevao echoed in her mind again. The apprentice her parents once trained, the ambitious strategist who disappeared after their deaths. "You said earlier that Estevao wanted power," she said slowly. Vincenzo nodded once. "Yes?" Emily's voice grew more focused. "If he betrayed my parents years ago, why hasn't anyone stopped him?" Vincenzo gave a quiet, bitter smile. "Because he disappeared before anyone could prove it." Emily's fingers tightened around the pistol resting in her lap. "You think he's behind tonight?" Vincenzo met her eyes. "It's possible." Emily leaned forward slightly. "But why target both of us?" Vincenzo answered calmly. "Because we're the last two people who could expose him." That sentence hung heavy between them. Emily's thoughts raced again. If Estevao had betrayed her parents years ago, then framing Raymond Cassano would erase suspicion from himself. And if Emily grew up believing the Cassano family murdered her parents, she would eventually try to destroy them herself. A perfect distraction, a perfect weapon. Emily felt a cold realization spreading through her chest. "He turned me into revenge," she whispered. Before Vincenzo could respond, a faint buzzing sound came from his jacket pocket. Emily's head snapped up instantly. "What was that?" Vincenzo looked down. "My phone." Emily hesitated for a moment before leaning across the seat and carefully pulling the device from his pocket. She kept the gun aimed at him while checking the screen. A name flashed across it. "Matteo." Emily frowned slightly. "Who's Matteo?" Vincenzo answered calmly. "My security chief." Emily hesitated again before answering the call and putting the phone on speaker. A tense voice filled the car instantly. "Boss, where the hell are you? We lost your signal an hour ago." Vincenzo spoke calmly. "I'm fine." Matteo's voice lowered with relief. "Good. Because we just intercepted something strange." Emily's attention sharpened instantly. Vincenzo frowned. "What kind of strange?" There was a short pause before Matteo answered. Someone has been moving money through offshore accounts connected to a ghost identity. Emily felt a strange chill run down her spine. Vincenzo's voice grew serious. Whose identity? Matteo's next words came slowly. A man named Estevao. Silence filled the car instantly. Emily's heartbeat grew louder in her ears. Vincenzo glanced at her briefly before asking another question. What else? Matteo continued quickly. He's been hiring mercenaries, Portuguese crews mostly. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, the final pieces sliding into place. Vincenzo's voice remained steady. Matteo, send me everything you have on him. Already doing it, Matteo replied. But boss, there's something else. Vincenzo's expression hardened. What? Matteo hesitated before speaking again. Our sources say Estevao arrived in Milan tonight. Emily's eyes snapped open again. Vincenzo's voice dropped into a cold whisper. Where? Matteo answered quietly. Less than 10 kilometers from your last known location. The rain outside suddenly felt colder. Emily slowly lowered the phone and looked at Vincenzo. Her voice was calm now, but a new fire burned inside it. Looks like the ghost finally stepped out of the shadows. Vincenzo nodded once. Yes. Emily tightened her grip on the pistol again. But this time the anger in her eyes wasn't aimed at him anymore. The rain finally began to slow as Emily restarted the car engine. The quiet hum of the motor filled the warehouse street again, but the tension inside the vehicle felt completely different now. Just an hour earlier, Emily had tied Vincenzo Cassano up like a prisoner and planned to end his life before sunrise. Now the name Estevao sat between them like a dark shadow connecting their pasts. Emily stared through the cracked windshield for a moment, her thoughts racing through every piece of information she had learned tonight. The NIS had raised her, trained her, filled her mind with one clear enemy. But if Estevao had truly betrayed her parents, then someone had deliberately pointed her anger in the wrong direction. Her chest tightened as a disturbing possibility formed in her mind. If Estevao framed the Cassano family, she said slowly, then he knew exactly what would happen to me. Vincenzo nodded slightly from the back seat. He knew a child who lost her parents would grow up wanting revenge. Emily's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, and he turned that revenge into a weapon. Vincenzo's voice stayed calm. Yes. Emily leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for a second as memories flashed through her mind. The endless training, the quiet encouragement from her instructors, the constant reminder that Raymond Cassano had destroyed her family. For years, she had believed she was fighting for justice. Now, the possibility that someone had carefully built that hatred inside her made her stomach twist with anger. She opened her eyes again and looked at Vincenzo through the mirror. I should still kill you, she said quietly. Vincenzo raised an eyebrow slightly. Why? Emily shrugged faintly. Because that was my mission. Vincenzo gave a small, tired smile. You're not the kind of person who blindly follows a mission anymore. Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached behind her seat and pulled a small combat knife from her boot. Vincenzo watched carefully as she leaned over the back seat. For a moment he thought she might cut his throat. Instead, the blade sliced through the rope binding his wrists. The thick fibers snapped instantly. Vincenzo slowly rubbed his wrists, surprised but not showing it too clearly. Emily cut the ropes around his ankles next. Don't make me regret that, she warned. Vincenzo stretched his arms slightly, feeling circulation return to his hands. Then he leaned forward between the seats. You just made the smartest decision of the night. Emily snorted quietly. Don't thank me yet. Vincenzo glanced out the window at the empty street. So, what's the plan now? Emily looked straight ahead again. Simple. She shifted the car into gear. We find Estevao. Vincenzo studied her face carefully. And then? Emily's eyes hardened. Then I ask him one question. Vincenzo tilted his head. Which question? Emily's voice became cold as ice. Why he killed my parents. The car pulled out of the warehouse street and merged back into the wet Milan roads. The city lights reflected across the puddles like scattered gold. Vincenzo sat back in his seat, watching her drive with sharp focus. "If Estevao is really here tonight," he said slowly, "he won't be hiding in small places." Emily nodded slightly. Powerful men like attention." Vincenzo gave a faint smile. "Exactly." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone again. Emily shot him a quick warning look. "Careful." Vincenzo unlocked the screen calmly. "Relax. I'm calling someone who might know where our ghost is staying." The phone rang twice before someone answered. A deep voice spoke on the other end. "Boss?" Vincenzo replied calmly. "Matteo, I need information fast." Emily listened quietly while keeping her eyes on the road. Matteo answered immediately. "I've been digging since we talked earlier." Vincenzo's voice sharpened slightly. "Tell me." There was a brief pause before Matteo spoke again. "Estevao didn't sneak into Milan quietly." Vincenzo frowned. "Meaning?" Matteo's voice lowered. "He checked into one of the most expensive hotels in the city." Emily glanced at Vincenzo quickly. "Which one?" Vincenzo asked into the phone. Matteo answered without hesitation. "The Palazzo Verdanza." Emily's eyebrows lifted slightly. That hotel was famous in Milan. Politicians, celebrities, and powerful businessmen stayed there whenever they wanted luxury and privacy. Vincenzo ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Well," he said calmly, "our ghost is staying in a palace." Emily turned the car toward the glowing skyline of central Milan. The tall silhouette of the Palazzo Verdanza tower could already be seen in the distance. Its windows glowed warmly against the dark sky like a golden lighthouse. As the car moved closer to the city center, Emily felt her heartbeat slowly speeding up again. But this time it wasn't fear driving her. It was something deeper. 14 years of unanswered questions were suddenly within reach. Vincenzo leaned slightly toward the window, watching the towering hotel grow larger ahead of them. "You realize something," he said quietly. Emily kept her eyes on the road. "What?" Vincenzo crossed his arms calmly. "If Estevao really orchestrated everything, he probably knows you're here." Emily's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "Good." Vincenzo glanced at her. "Good?" Emily nodded once. The lights of the Palazzo Verdanza reflected across her focused eyes. "Because I want him to know I'm coming." The towering glass doors of the Palazzo Verdanza reflected the wet Milan streets like a mirror of gold and shadow. Emily parked the car 2 blocks away, aimed far enough to avoid attention, but close enough to watch the entrance clearly. The rain had almost stopped now, leaving the pavement slick and shining under the tall streetlights. Wealthy guests moved in and out of the hotel lobby, their laughter and quiet conversations drifting through the open doors. To anyone passing by, it looked like a normal night at one of Milan's most luxurious hotels. But inside that building was a man who had quietly shaped Emily's entire life without her even knowing it. She sat behind the wheel for a moment, studying the entrance carefully. Her mind worked through every possible scenario. Estevao wasn't just another criminal hiding in a dark room. If Vincenzo's suspicions were right, he had been manipulating powerful people for years. A man like that never traveled without protection. There will be guards," Emily said quietly. Vincenzo nodded from the passenger seat. "Definitely." Emily glanced at him briefly. "How many?" Vincenzo thought for a moment. "Enough to make a direct fight stupid." Emily leaned back slightly and exhaled slowly. For 14 years she had imagined the moment she would face the man responsible for her parents' deaths. In her mind, it had always been simple. Walk in, pull the trigger, end the story. But reality was never that clean. Vincenzo studied her expression carefully. "You're thinking too much again?" he said. Emily shot him a quick look. "Planning keeps people alive." Vincenzo nodded. "True, but overthinking can freeze you." Emily smirked faintly. "Don't worry, I'm not frozen." She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small black pouch. Inside were several compact tools she carried for operations: lockpicks, a small flashlight, a folded silenced pistol. Vincenzo watched with quiet interest. "You came prepared." Emily shrugged. "That's what 14 years of training does." Vincenzo leaned back slightly, his eyes drifting toward the hotel again. "Estevao chose a public place for a reason." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Vincenzo answered calmly, "Because powerful men hide best where nobody expects violence." Emily nodded slowly. That made sense. A luxury hotel full of cameras, guests, and security would discourage most attackers. But Emily wasn't most attackers. They stepped out of the car together and began walking toward the glowing entrance of the Palazzo Verdanza. Emily moved with calm confidence, not her posture relaxed enough to blend in with the wealthy guests arriving for late dinners and drinks. Vincenzo walked beside her, adjusting his jacket slightly to hide the bullet hole in the fabric from earlier. The doorman greeted them politely as they approached, but just before they reached the golden doors, Vincenzo suddenly stopped walking. Emily took 2 more steps before noticing and turning back at him with a slight frown. "What?" she asked quietly. Vincenzo gestured down at both of them. His shirt was wrinkled from the ropes, slightly torn, and stained with rain and dust. Emily's outfit looked no better after the chase and gunfire. "We can't go in looking like this," he said calmly. Emily blinked at him in disbelief. "You're worried about fashion right now?" Vincenzo gave a small shrug. "I'm worried about not getting stopped by security before we even reach the elevator." Before Emily could argue, the quiet hum of an engine rolled up beside the curb. A sleek black luxury car pulled smoothly to a stop next to them. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out. Matteo. He walked toward them, holding 2 garment bags with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Boss," he said with a slight nod, handing Vincenzo 1 bag before offering the other to Emily. Inside was a perfectly tailored dark suit and a stunning evening dress that shimmered softly under the hotel lights. Emily stared at the clothing for a moment, completely caught off guard. Then she looked up at Vincenzo, confusion written across her face. "When exactly did you have time to make all these arrangements?" she asked. Vincenzo gave a faint smile as he took the suit. "The moment I realized tonight was going to get complicated." As they stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut with a soft chime. Emily pressed the button for the top floor. Vincenzo leaned against the wall slightly, studying her again. "You know something?" he said quietly. Emily kept her eyes on the rising floor numbers. "What?" Vincenzo folded his arms. 14 years ago, my father told me something about your parents." Emily's gaze flickered toward him briefly. "What did he say?" Vincenzo's voice softened slightly. "He said Marco and Sofia Valenti were the bravest people he ever knew." Emily felt something twist inside her chest, but she forced her focus back to the elevator panel. Vincenzo continued, They protected people who couldn't protect themselves." Emily swallowed quietly. The doors opened with a soft sound before she could respond. The top floor hallway stretched ahead of them, lined with thick carpets and tall golden lamps. At the very end stood a pair of double doors leading to the penthouse suite. 2 armed guards stood outside it. Emily and Vincenzo walked down the hallway slowly. The guards straightened slightly when they noticed them approaching. One of them raised a hand. "Penthouse access is private." Emily stopped a few steps away and gave a small, polite smile. "We're expected." The guards exchanged a brief glance. One of them reached toward his radio, but before he could speak, a calm voice echoed from inside the penthouse behind them. "Let them in." The guards froze instantly. Then the double doors opened slowly. The warm light spilled into the hallway. Inside the luxurious suite stood a tall man with silver threaded through his dark hair. His posture was relaxed, almost welcoming. His eyes moved calmly between Emily and Vincenzo like a chess player examining 2 interesting pieces on a board. When he spoke again, his voice carried a strange mixture of warmth and arrogance. "Emily Valenti, he said smoothly. "You've grown into a remarkable woman." Emily felt her entire body go still. She had never seen him clearly before, but somehow she knew immediately who he was. Estevao smiled slightly as if greeting an old friend. "And Vincenzo Cassano," he added casually. "It's good that you survived the drive." His eyes settled back on Emily again. "I was hoping the two of you would come together." Emily slowly raised her pistol. Her voice came out cold and steady. "You killed my parents!" Estevao tilted his head slightly, almost amused by the accusation. "Such a simple sentence," he said quietly, "but the truth is far more interesting than that." The doors of the penthouse suite closed slowly behind Emily and Vincenzo with a soft, heavy click. The sound echoed across the luxurious room like the closing of a vault. The suite was enormous, decorated with warm golden lighting, polished marble floors, and tall glass windows that overlooked the glittering night skyline of Milan. From this height, the city looked peaceful, quiet, almost beautiful, but inside the room, the air felt thick with tension. Estevao stood near a long glass table with a drink in his hand, completely relaxed, as if he were hosting old friends instead of facing two people who had every reason to want him dead. The two guards who had been outside now stood quietly near the walls, their hands close to their weapons but waiting for instructions. Emily's pistol remained aimed straight at Estevao's chest. Her arms were steady, but inside her chest her heart beat like a war drum. 14 years of anger stood between her and the man who had shaped her life through lies and betrayal. Estevao watched her calmly, almost proudly. "You look exactly like your mother when she was angry," he said softly. Emily's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. "Don't say her name." Estevao raised his hand slightly in a calm gesture. "Why not? Sofia Valenti was one of the most brilliant women I ever knew." Emily took a slow step forward. "You betrayed them." Her voice was sharp and cold. Estevao tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a teacher studies a promising student. "Betrayal is such a dramatic word," he said smoothly. "I prefer to call it opportunity." Vincenzo's eyes hardened instantly. "You sold them to a rival family," he said. Estevao didn't deny it. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink. "Your father built a powerful empire, Vincenzo, but power always attracts ambition." Emily's voice trembled with rage. "They trusted you." Estevao's smile faded slightly, replaced by something colder. "And that was their mistake." The words hit Emily like a punch to the chest. For years she had imagined confronting the man responsible for her parents' deaths, but hearing his calm admission still felt unreal. Vincenzo stepped slightly closer beside her, his voice low and controlled. "Why frame my father?" Estevao set his glass down on the table. "Because Raymond Cassano was the only man smart enough to hunt me down." His eyes moved calmly between them. "So I created a distraction strong enough to keep everyone looking in the wrong direction." Emily felt the ground beneath her beliefs finally collapse completely. "You turned me into that distraction," she whispered. Estevao nodded almost proudly. "Yes." He walked slowly toward the large windows behind him, his hands behind his back like a professor explaining a lesson. A grieving child with the right training becomes a perfect weapon, especially when her anger is aimed carefully. Emily's hands trembled now, but she forced herself to keep the gun steady. "The NIS," she said quietly. Estevao chuckled softly. "Ah, yes, your noble protectors." He turned back toward them with an amused expression. "You really believed they saved you out of kindness?" Emily's stomach twisted. Vincenzo frowned sharply. "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Estevao's smile widened slightly. "The world of intelligence agencies and organized crime is not as separate as people like to believe." Emily felt her pulse pounding in her ears. "Say it clearly." Estevao stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. I gave them the story about Raymond Cassano. The room seemed to grow colder around her. And in return, he continued calmly, they gave me something far more valuable. Emily's voice barely came out. What? Estevao's answer was quiet, but devastating. Time. The silence that followed felt crushing. Emily's entire childhood suddenly looked different in her mind. Every lesson, every instructor, every carefully repeated story about Raymond Cassano being responsible. Her voice cracked slightly. They lied to me. Estevao shrugged lightly. They needed a reason to keep you loyal. Vincenzo's fists clenched. You manipulated an entire intelligence agency? Estevao laughed quietly. No, just a few men inside it. That's all it takes. Emily's anger finally boiled over. And tonight? She demanded. Why try to kill both of us now? Estevao's smile returned, calm and satisfied. Because the story was reaching its final chapter. He gestured casually toward them. You were supposed to kill Vincenzo tonight, Emily. Then my men would eliminate you immediately after. Emily felt cold realization spread through her body. 2 loose ends, she whispered. Estevao nodded. Exactly. Vincenzo's voice dropped into a dangerous whisper. But we survived. Estevao's eyes glinted with amusement. Yes, which made this evening far more entertaining. Emily raised the pistol higher, her hands steady again now that the truth had fully surfaced. You destroyed my family. Estevao shrugged calmly. Your parents were obstacles. Emily took another step forward. You ruined 14 years of my life. Estevao tilted his head slightly. And yet, look what those 14 years created. His eyes moved over her like a craftsman admiring his work. A warrior, fast, intelligent, deadly. Emily's voice was ice. You think I'm your creation? Estevao smiled faintly. In many ways, yes. Vincenzo's patience finally snapped. Enough. His voice carried quiet fury now. You talk like you're proud of all this. Estevao spread his arms slightly. Of course I am. He looked out over the glowing city skyline again. Yeah, power belongs to those willing to shape the world instead of complaining about it. Emily's fingers slowly tightened on the trigger. This is the end of your world. Estevao didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled calmly. Are you sure? His hand moved slowly toward the table beside him. Emily's eyes narrowed. Don't. But Estevao pressed a small button hidden beneath the table anyway. Instantly, the 2 guards near the wall raised their weapons. The quiet room exploded into chaos. Vincenzo lunged sideways, knocking Emily to the ground just as gunfire shattered the glass behind them. The penthouse windows burst open in a storm of fragments as bullets ripped across the room. Emily rolled behind the marble table, her pistol firing twice in sharp response. 1 guard collapsed instantly, the other ducked behind a pillar. Vincenzo grabbed a fallen weapon and fired toward the balcony as more gunmen suddenly appeared from outside. Emily's heart pounded wildly as the entire suite turned into a battlefield. But through the chaos, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Estevao wasn't fighting. He was calmly backing toward the balcony door with a small, satisfied smile on his face, as if he had expected this moment all along. The penthouse had turned into chaos. Shattered glass covered the marble floor like glittering ice, while gunfire echoed through the luxurious suite. The city lights of Milan flashed through the broken windows behind them, mixing with the bright sparks of bullets, striking metal and stone. Emily pressed her back against the overturned marble table, breathing steadily as she checked the chamber of her pistol. Then her mind had gone completely calm. Years of training had taken over. Across the room, Vincenzo crouched behind a thick pillar, firing controlled shots toward the balcony where 2 of Estevao's men were trying to push inside. One of them fell with a heavy thud after Vincenzo's 3rd shot. The other quickly pulled back behind the balcony wall. The gunfire slowed for a moment, leaving only the sound of broken glass crunching under footsteps and the distant hum of the city below. Emily looked up just in time to see Estevao moving calmly toward the open balcony doors. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't rushing. He walked like a man who believed he was still completely in control. That calm confidence ignited something fierce inside Emily's chest. 14 years of lies had led to this exact moment, and she was not going to let him walk away again. Emily moved quickly, sliding across the floor and rising behind a low cabinet for cover. "Vincenzo!" she called sharply. He glanced toward her instantly. She nodded toward the balcony. "He's escaping!" Vincenzo swore under his breath and fired 2 more shots toward the remaining guard, forcing the man to stay hidden. "Go!" he shouted back. Emily didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the room, keeping low while shattered glass crunched beneath her boots. The cold night air rushed into the suite as she stepped onto the wide balcony. The wind whipped through her blonde hair as she scanned the rooftop above. A black helicopter sat on the helipad, built on the upper level of the building. Its blades had already started turning slowly. Estevao stood near the stairs leading upward, adjusting his coat as if preparing for a casual departure. When he noticed Emily stepping onto the balcony, he stopped and smiled faintly. "I was wondering when you would catch up," he said calmly. Emily raised her pistol instantly. "This ends tonight." The wind howled louder between them, carrying the sounds of the city far below. For a moment, the world felt frozen around the two of them. Estevao studied her quietly. There was no fear in his eyes, only curiosity. "You know," he said slowly, "your parents would have been proud of you." Emily's jaw tightened. "Don't say another word about them." Estevao raised one eyebrow slightly. "Why? They were remarkable people." Emily stepped forward carefully, her pistol still aimed directly at his chest. "You betrayed them." Estevao sighed as if the conversation bored him. "Your parents were brilliant strategists, Emily, but they lacked one quality that powerful people must possess." Emily's finger tightened on the trigger. "What quality?" Estevao's smile returned, thin and cold. "Ruthlessness." The word echoed sharply across the balcony. "They believed loyalty mattered more than survival," he continued calmly. "That weakness made them easy to remove." Emily felt rage surge through her veins. "You murdered them because they were better people than you." Estevao shrugged lightly. "I removed obstacles." Emily took another step forward. "You manipulated my entire life." Estevao nodded once. "And look how effective it was?" His eyes gleamed slightly. "Without my influence, you would still be a child in London living an ordinary life." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper filled with fury. "My parents deserved that ordinary life." Behind Emily, the sounds of gunfire inside the suite suddenly stopped. A moment later, Vincenzo stepped onto the balcony, breathing hard, a rifle still in his hands. The last guard inside had fallen. His eyes moved quickly between Emily and Estevao. Above them, the helicopter blades were spinning faster now, the engine beginning to roar louder as the pilot prepared to lift off. Estevao glanced toward the rooftop stairs and smiled faintly. "Perfect timing," he murmured. Then, without warning, his calm expression vanished. His hand moved lightning fast inside his coat and pulled out a small black remote. Vincenzo's eyes widened instantly. "Emily, ah!" But Estevao had already pressed the button. A sharp mechanical click echoed from beneath the balcony floor. The explosion that followed ripped through part of the penthouse wall behind them, unblasting fire and debris into the night. The shockwave threw Emily backward against the railing, knocking the breath from her lungs. Smoke and sparks filled the air as pieces of glass and stone rained across the rooftop. Estevao laughed as he stepped toward the stairs leading to the helicopter. "Did you really think I would walk into my own trap?" he shouted over the roaring wind. Vincenzo staggered back to his feet and fired twice, but the shots missed as Estevao moved quickly toward the helipad. The helicopter was already lifting slightly from the ground. Emily pushed herself up despite the ringing in her ears. Through the smoke, she saw Estevao reaching the top of the stairs, victory already in his eyes. That was the moment everything inside her went still. 14 years of anger. 14 years of lies. She raised her pistol slowly, steady despite the wind. Estevao turned just as she fired. The single shot cracked through the chaos. The bullet struck him square in the chest. His confident smile vanished instantly as his body stumbled backward. For a brief second, he looked shocked that his perfect plan had failed. Then he collapsed onto the cold rooftop, the helicopter lifting away above him with no master left to escape. Emily stood still, her pistol lowered slightly while the reality of the moment settled around her. The man who had manipulated her life for 14 years now lay motionless at her feet. Vincenzo stepped closer and gently took the gun from her trembling hand. "It's over," he said quietly. Emily stared at the city lights stretching across the horizon. The anger that had driven her for so long slowly faded, leaving something quieter behind. Relief, pain, and a strange sense of freedom she had never felt before. Vincenzo stood beside her in silence for a moment before speaking again. "You could stay," he said softly. Emily glanced at him. "Stay?" Vincenzo nodded. "With the Cassano family. Your parents were part of it. You still have a place there." Emily looked back toward the glowing city skyline. For the first time in years, the future felt uncertain in a good way. She gave a small smile and shook her head gently. "My life doesn't belong to revenge anymore." Vincenzo studied her carefully. "Then where does it belong?" Emily stepped toward the stairs leading down from the rooftop. She paused beside him and gave a playful glance over her shoulder. "I have a job to finish," she said lightly. Then her smile turned slightly mischievous. "But maybe one day I'll come back to Milan." Vincenzo watched her walk away across the rooftop, the wind brushing softly through her hair as she disappeared down the stairs. And just like that, the war that began 14 years earlier finally came to an end. Emily Valenti walked away from the rooftop not as a weapon shaped by lies, but as someone who finally knew the truth about her parents and herself. Estevao's long game of manipulation ended with a single shot, but the courage it took to pull that trigger came from years of pain, strength, and survival. Sometimes revenge doesn't give you peace. Sometimes the truth does, and sometimes the most powerful ending is simply choosing a new path forward. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful mafia romance stories like this one. And before you go, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Until the next story, stay curious.